In this lesson, we're going to start learning the notes on the neck. I'm going to show you some super useful tips and tricks so you can memorize important notes and start navigating the fretboard. Now, it's important to note that this video is a direct follow-up to the previous lesson where I explained how the notes in music actually work. So if you're not familiar with the system of the 12 notes, do check out that video first. Just a quick warning before we begin, I'd strongly advise against just trying to learn all the notes on the neck off by heart straight away. I've seen students try to do this and the majority of the time it doesn't work and they just end up spending loads of time on it and end up quite frustrated. You're much better off prioritizing important notes that you can use straight away and use as really good reference points. That way you'll waste a lot less time and it'll be a lot more beneficial. You can download some more info and some diagrams about all the music theory as well as the rest of the content for the entire course on my Patreon page via the link in the description, but for now let's get stuck into these notes on the neck. So we're going to start with a bit of new terminology, which is tones and semitones. Now these are terms used to describe intervals or distances between notes in music, or in our case, distances between frets on the fretboard. Now a tone is a 2-fret jump. So for example, if I start on the 5th fret of the bottom string, that would be the note A. And if I move up a tone, that would be a 2-fret jump up to the 7th fret, which is the note B. So A and B are a tone apart. Now semitone, semi meaning half, so half a tone is only a 1-fret jump. So if we start from the 5th fret, which was A, and move up a semitone, that would be the A sharp on the 6th fret. So tone is a 2-fret jump, semitone is a 1-fret jump. On to the actual notes now, and we're going to start by learning the first 3 dots on the lowest 2 strings. Now on most guitars, the dots or inlays are normally found on the odd-numbered frets starting from the 3rd fret. So this would be the 3rd, 5th and 7th frets. I suppose if your guitar has slightly different inlays or dots, you can either just get used to it by visualizing the way it is on your guitar, or you could maybe stick a little sticker on the top of the fretboard just so you can always have a reference point. But I want you to start by playing these notes in ascending order of pitch. So just to clarify, that's on the low E string, 3rd fret, 5th fret and 7th fret. And then onto the A string, 3rd fret, 5th fret and 7th fret. So here's the super simple system for memorizing these 6 notes, starting with the 3rd fret on the bottom string. Now by this stage you should be familiar with what a G chord looks like. Here's a big G. And as you can see, I've got the 2nd finger playing the 3rd fret on the bottom string. This is the root note of your G chord, so I want you to use your G chord to memorize that 3rd fret on the bottom string is the note G. So we've got the G on the 3rd fret of the low E string. Following this, we're going to learn the 5, 7 on E, and then 3, 5, 7 on A, very simply, because they're just the first 5 letters of the normal alphabet. So A, B, C, D, E. So they ascend in the alphabet as they ascend in pitch. So just to clarify all of that, we've got G on the 3rd fret, on the bottom string, which you remember because it's the root note of your G chord, and then moving upwards in pitch from there, we've got A, B, C, D, E. So for absolute clarification, 3rd fret on the low E is a G note, 5th fret on the low E is an A note, 7th fret on the low E is a B note, 3rd fret on the A string is a C note, 5th fret on the A string is a D note, and 7th fret on the A string is an E note. So G, A, B, C, D, E. Now if you have a memory anything like mine, you might want to pause here and just spend a little bit of time running through those notes and really ingraining them into your memory, because everything that follows is based off using these notes as a reference point. I usually give students a little test at this point in the lesson. I'll say find me an A note, find me an E note, find me a C note, etc. And they're normally pretty surprised at how much faster they can find the notes already, rather than having to count up from the open string every single time. Now I really want you to get to the point where you absolutely know these notes rather than just remember them. So if someone asks you to play one of these notes, you can just jump straight to it without spending any time having to figure it out. So once you've got those 6 core notes absolutely ingrained in your memory, it's time to start throwing in some semitone steps. Now the easiest way to start this is to start throwing in your sharps and flats. So remember, to sharpen a note means make it one higher, and to flatten it, one lower. So if we start on A on the 5th fret of the low E string, the 5th fret is the note A, the A flat would be one note lower, so the 4th fret, back to the A, and the A sharp would be one fret higher on the 6th fret. But remember, we can also start from the B on the 7th fret and flatten it to the 6th fret. So that 6th fret is both A sharp and B flat. So if I go through all the sharps in ascending order, we would have G on the 3rd fret, G sharp, A sharp, B. Remember, there's no sharps or flats in between B and C, so we're jumping straight to that C note on the 3rd fret of the A. Then we've got C sharp, D, D sharp, and E. And then if we descend using flats, we've got E, E flat, D, D flat, C. There's no C flat, so we're straight to B, B flat, A flat, G, and you can go one more and have a G flat on the 2nd fret. So now you've got all them natural notes and the sharps and flats as well. Might be worth testing yourself, you know, try and find a C sharp, try and find a B flat, try and find an A sharp and an E flat and a G sharp. You know, see if you can find them all relatively quickly using them 6 core notes and then just jumping up or down depending on whether it's a sharp or a flat. The next stage is to start throwing in the natural notes, which we can find a semitone step apart. You should remember that this is B and C and E and F from the previous lesson. They're the 2 pairs that you've got to remember don't have sharps and flats in between them. So if we look at the 6 notes we started with before, we've got G, A and B. And B was part of one of those pairs, so there's no B sharp, so the note immediately higher than B, so 7th fret to the 8th fret, is the note C. So on that bottom string we've got G, A, B on the 7th fret, C on the 8th fret, and likewise if we move to this C note on the 3rd fret of the A string, we've also got the B note 1 fret lower on the 2nd fret. Now the other example that we've got within our core 6 notes is the E up here on the 7th fret of the A string. If I play that one for you. Remember that there's no E sharp, it just jumps straight to F, so that means that the 8th fret on the A string is an F. And one final one, remember we've also got the open low E string. So 1 fret higher than that would be the 1st fret of the low E string, which is the note F. So that's a handy one to know as well. So with that information, you've got access to all 12 notes. So there isn't a note that someone could ask you to play that you can't find, and I think that's a really good starting point. So for the rest of this video, I'm just going to fly through a few extra tips and tricks that you can use once you're happy with those initial notes, but I would definitely prioritize getting the material that we've already covered in this lesson down first. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to find octaves. Now I spoke in the last lesson about how you can find the octave of an open string at the 12th fret, for example the open E, and then 12th fret E. You can hear that they're an octave apart. But that is quite a distance to jump and it only works with the open strings. So this is how you find octaves in one position on the guitar. And the way to do that, if I start from this G note on the 3rd fret of the bottom string, is to move up 2 frets and then up 2 strings. Okay, so I'm starting 3rd fret bottom string, I'm moving up 2 frets to the 5th fret, then up 2 strings to the D string, and that gives me a G octave. If I play both notes together, you can hear that they're related. That's how you find an octave shape. This works on the A string as well, so here's the note C on the 3rd fret. If I move along 2 frets and then up 2 strings, I get the octave of my C. That would be the 5th fret on the G string. So this is useful for finding notes on the neck, but you can also play melodies in octaves. Just gives you a bit of a thicker sound than a single note. And you can also use it to figure out what notes are that are in the higher octave as well. So for example, if I start with this 9th fret on the G string, and I'm wondering what note is that, I can jump down 2 strings and then down 2 frets and find out from our core notes that we learned before that it's an E note. So that would be an E octave. However, it is important to be aware that this octave shape only works starting on the bottom 2 strings. For example, if I start on this G note again and I jump up the octave, I can't then use the same shape to jump up an octave again, because if I play those two together, you can hear that they're a little bit dissonant and not an octave. So this is just for the bottom 2 strings, but it's a good way to use the 6 core notes that you've already know, as well as the sharps and flats in between them, and start expanding your knowledge on the fretboard just using that little octave shape. Next, I want to talk about this awkward little area of the fretboard here between the 8th and 12th frets. And the main thing I want to point out here is that it can be a lot easier to work backwards from the 12th fret rather than working upwards from the bottom. We know that the 12th fret is the octave of the open string, so the 12th fret of the low E is also an E. So if I work backwards from there, say for example if I jump down a tone, so a 2 fret jump, we know that we've got a D note. Because if we look at our 6 notes from before, we've got an E on the 7th fret of the A, and a tone lower is D. So likewise up at the 12th fret, we know we've got an E, so a tone lower is a D. And then on the A string, we know we've got an A at the 12th fret. So if we jump down a tone, that would be a G, just like we've got an A here, and then a tone lower, a G, on the bottom string. The next useful tip to know is that because we've got a low E string and a high E string, if you learned the notes on one of them, you also know them on the other, because they have to be the same because they're both starting from E. So for example, if we know that we've got the 3rd fret is G, the 5th fret is A, and the 7th fret is B on the bottom string, it has to be the same on the top string. There's G, A, and B. They're 2 octaves higher because that string is tuned 2 octaves higher, but they're the same note names because they're both starting from E. And this is handy to remember in the long term, because when you start learning scales, whatever the scale shape is on the bottom string must also be the same on the top string because they contain the same notes. The next little tip is that on most of the strings, the 5th fret of the string that you're playing sounds the same as the open string 1 string higher. For example, if I play the 5th fret on the low E string, we know that that's the note A, and it's actually the same pitch as the open A string. Likewise, the 5th fret of the A string is the note D, and that sounds the same as the open D string. Same for the D string onto the G string. The only time where this doesn't work is between the G and B string, where it changes to the 4th fret. That's just to do with the tuning of the guitar, but then between the B and the E string it goes back to that 5th fret pattern. This is also how people tune guitars by ear. If you've ever seen someone do that, that would be how you get started with it. And the final point that I'm going to make today, if I just scooch over here, is that from the 12th fret upwards, we're into the 2nd octave of the guitar, and it's an exact duplicate of the 1st octave of the guitar, just obviously you hear everything an octave higher. So in this case, the 12th fret is acting as the new open string, obviously being the octave of the open strings. So we've got E, A, D, G, B, E on the 12th fret. And then if we start from the dots again, the first 3 dots are our G, A, B, C, D, and E. So if you learn the bottom half of the fretboard, you can transfer that knowledge to the top half as well. So I hope that's helped you get started memorizing a few of the important notes on the neck. That's the end of the theory part of this series, so well done for sticking through it and getting into a bit of theory at this early stage of your guitar journey. Remember, there's extra info and diagrams on my Patreon page via the link in the description, and all the lessons and the entire course are nice and organised on my YouTube channel page, so feel free to subscribe if you want to follow along, and in the next few lessons we're going to get stuck into some lead guitar techniques, so hopefully I'll see you in those.